Hey everybody, this video is a series of highlights from an alumni listening session that we did in April of 2026. We invited my former students in who have taken history classes with me or were history majors in the last 20 years or so that I've been teaching. And they gave us what I hope are some really valuable insights into what they've done with their history degree, what kind of skills you're building in history, and how to translate those skills into the work world. So enjoy, and thanks for checking this out. And remember, history is fun. Thanks. Ours was a U.S. history major?
I was, yes.
Okay. Was one of my capstone students. And now it's the CTIO manager at Vector Force Development, and you can tell us all what that is.
Yeah, you want me to tell you now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I took the long way around to get to the position that I'm currently in, but I essentially manage all of the professional development, training, and compliance infrastructure for a large energy infrastructure company. Before that, I was a regional general manager that oversaw almost 2 million hours of security and safety services for a private, one of the world's largest security companies. So I actually came out of Georgia Gwinnett College and straight into the corporate world, right? And so it's a very non-traditional path. But yeah, right now I oversee a large team who deal with everything from regulatory compliance of government agencies, OSHA stuff, individual safety, a lot of systems thinking, which is what I'm going to talk about when we talk about what we're looking for, that history majors have, systems thinking.
Awesome. Systems thinking.
I would say, because for me, the connection to what I do now, which I work in HR, so I'm a technical product manager for our applicant tracking system for a fintech company called Jack Henry. So I build solutions every day where we are going through, and right now, one of the biggest problems we have is detecting fraudulent candidates, because we do build applications for banks. We are a high risk target. And so what I have to do is come up with solutions for us to identify those actors when they come into our system, and before they start to go through the interview process, or God forbid we hire them. So there's learning research techniques and history, being able to be tenacious and following leads and making connections, I think, are the biggest things that history taught me through not just undergrad, but also graduate school doing public history at JMU. So those are skills I use every day and have since I graduated with my master's in 2012.
Yeah, I currently work at a bank, but I also work at a family law firm for 6 years. And just like the research aspect of it, knowing how to do the research, what formats people would kind of want, answering the questions that people don't necessarily think they want answered, or knowing that that's the question they want answered. So the history classes have definitely helped out a lot with that aspect. And even in banking, kind of to Eric's credit, you get people that are trying to pull fast ones, pull fraud all the time, and knowing the little idiosyncrasies of that stuff. A lot of it did have to do with the history and knowing questions too.
Well, and I would piggyback off of that. So I wrote a short answer, but most of the work, unless you're at a company, is going to be project-based. So if you apply that at a law firm, if you apply that at a bank, if you're doing, what I do, which is I take on lots of different projects for people. But the biggest skill that you're going to walk away with a history degree that other disciplines do not offer is critical thinking. You're going to be able to look at material and ask the right questions. And because people, to her point, that people don't know what they don't know. And 9 times out of 10, they want to know, but it's also taking how historians talk, which is in, volumes and not necessarily in 180 characters, but taking that great information that you learn, asking the right questions and distilling it down in a palatable form that humanity can digest, not other historians. And that's something that we learned to do really, really well in the history department. We love facts and we love to tell people about them. So investigate, verify, synthesize, communicate. That's what we do.
Yeah, and that's a great example of something that I'm about to start working on right now, which is, you go from writing a paper, 3 to 5 page paper, an assignment, right? So you have a research phase, you have to come up with your topic, you have to find your sources, you go out and you build up to writing the paper. You don't just jump in and write the paper, at least I hope not. And then from there, that goes into master's thesis, right? That's a multi-chapter, multidisciplinary research project. I'm about to kick off a multi-million-dollar software replacement system across our company, 7,000 employees, with the same mentality, where we have to understand the way things are now. We have to understand who uses what and how it all connects. And it's kind of the same philosophy, just in a very different application.
What about for a therapist? Do you have to take in a lot of information?
Yes, and just listening to everybody, I think how history, or learning about history when I was here, it has informed my work, is because I have such a multicultural approach in my work, and I deal with a lot of trauma, and we hear a lot about generational trauma. Being informed of what the history was in these countries, where my clients are from, where their ancestors are from, knowing the history and asking the right questions, asking questions about their family's history, their family's involvement in military service, and things like that in their country. Going in with that information, I know which questions to ask to draw out what is salient in their story, and then all the way down to their immigration stories.
And you probably see how many clients in a day.
Typically about 6.
Right, so you have to get to the point quickly. You have to know which questions to ask, and
Absolutely.
you don't want to waste your
So,
interest.
one thing I was thinking when everyone else was talking about how their history background has affected their work is, I do feel like most of my work as a librarian directly ties into what I did as an undergrad. So of course I got the master's and I've worked in libraries and I've done all of that. It is a different skill set. But I do think that having the history background gave me a lot of solid foundation for those other skill sets. You don't have to be a history major to be a librarian. You can actually be any major to be a librarian. But from what I've seen, at least because I'm in a university library, so these types of librarians, I do feel like the ones that are the most comfortable with their work, that do really well, tend to be the history majors, the anthropology backgrounds, English majors. They're the ones who seem to thrive a bit more within that academic setting.
Well, I can speak a little bit to that. So my prior role, whenever I was working as a general manager for security, I started on the ground floor and I worked my way up through that organization, and so I wore a lot of different hats during that time and did a lot of different work. And one thing that I consistently saw when I was trying to climb that ladder is how in demand bilingualism was. And it was something that, I'll be honest, I underestimated how important it was going to be, especially and it was important both when I was doing field operations and then also when I moved into a corporate setting. And it was really in demand for 2 completely different reasons, again, neither of which I expected. So the first one was when we were doing security, and we're talking about physical security in a variety of environments, everything from healthcare settings to retail environments to data centers, everything. And so as our communities, the communities that we serve, diversify, the ability to de-escalate security-related issues, find common ground, be able to relate to people in a non-confrontational manner, being able to break that language barrier was everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it really, really, really made a difference. And even, and it made a difference on two levels. One, when there's a frustration and a challenge and an obstacle and an othering that occurs when you cannot directly communicate with somebody. But then the second piece of that was, even when you are trying to facilitate those communications through a third party, or as is increasingly becoming the case, through technology, which that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
What I have found, because there are security applications where technology is used to bridge the purely linguistic component of it, and what I have found is that even when you can leverage that technology to get past the barrier, you lose a lot in the process.
Right.
Because it does not create, it doesn't create a shared set of cultural identity or value, or we are the same, right? There's a sameness that doesn't get communicated when you're leveraging technology. And I will say that right before I left that organization, they had a heavy internal push to in any market we serviced where a 30% of the population of that market was spoke another language as their primary language. We were fast tracking people into those positions because it made such a difference.
Oh, wow.
And so that's on the security side. On the corporate side, it was the same thing, but it was for a different effect, right? Like, that's more client oriented. And what we found is that, when we would go to these business meetings and we're trying to build these relationships, being able to communicate to people who speak a different language in their primary language made a huge difference. It communicates, and again, technology can overcome some of the logistics, but I have just watched it over and over and over again. When you are greeting someone and communicating with them comfortably in the language that they speak as their primary language, it opens up a lot of practical doors. And it was something that I saw really benefit us when we were able to do it, and really hurt us when we weren't, and our competitors were.
Right.
So I think that there's a big sense in which I've seen that play out over and over and over.
Before we moved off this bilingual conversation,
Yeah,
I want
yeah.
to add something, because I agree with what everyone has said. And the technology is great and all the practical aspects are great, but for someone like me in my work, I'm not bilingual. I'm bilingual enough, but not to do my work, because there's the emotional aspect that technology
Sure.
cannot fill in, right? So to be able to sit across from somebody in their most vulnerable moments and to be able to understand them and speak to them on an emotional level, that's a whole nother skill set. So bilingual therapists are in demand.
Mm-hmm.
They are always full. They have to stop taking clients because, people want to get in. I refer all the time to the few bilingual therapists that I know. And so if you have the opportunity to sharpen your language skills, do it.
Thank you. Please.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, since y'all have history degrees, how did you leverage a history degree for different roles, like in business or manager roles or therapist roles?
Oh, I'm dying to take this one. Can I take this one?
How do you explain that to an employer that, hey, my history degree can work for this job?
Yeah, so for me, it was all about breaking down the skills. Because if you tell someone, I have a history degree, they are like, okay, what does that have to do with what I want you to do? But my ability to communicate verbally and in writing especially, right? My ability to, synthesize, that's one thing that we're talking about, distilling information, synthesize information, discern relevance, reproduce it, the ability to communicate effectively, and persuasively, using arguments, and supported by information, right? In fact, the very, very first job that I got out, and in fact, the reason that money is not everything, But the reason that I went the direction that I did, I was actually going to go into teaching when I left GGC. But I would have had to teach 20 years in the public school systems and earn 2 additional degrees to make my starting salary working in this other position. And the whole reason that I took that position was because they met me, and all I did was I demonstrated my verbal communication skills. I produced a document. They gave me some information. I synthesized the information. I turned it around to them, and that went so well that in subsequent interviews, as I was going through and sort of working my way into these various positions, I mean, I would oftentimes in interviews say, listen, put me to the test, right? Like, give me something that I can do for you to demonstrate to you what I'm capable of.
So they basically kind of gave you a history midterm when you interviewed. That's what it said. That's what we do, yeah.
Right, and those skills are in such high demand. A new thing that is really becoming very important is the ability to, we say critical thinking, but to examine bias, to search for evidence of inauthentic or problematic or inconsistent information, right? AI is a huge problem in interview infrastructure right now because it can produce such seemingly compelling things that are completely off base. One of our competitors actually recently went almost a quarter's worth of organizational planning off of information produced by AI, and it was totally wrong. Right? And so another thing that is happening is we're seeing an incredible demand for people who can look at a thing and ask critical questions about it to determine, where does it fit in the larger narrative? Does it make sense when compared with other sources of information? And so just being able to break down your skills and highlight those skills that you have as opposed to just relying on the tagline of your degree is a huge thing. At least it's in my space.
You put in your resume?
Yeah, like especially before I had other positions to kind of leverage. Again, that's what I did. I asked myself, what skills do I have and have I cultivated that they want? And I made a very skills-oriented resume, and it was wildly successful. It served me very well.
I was thinking in terms of how to use learning, like being bilingual, any amount of languages and applying it to something. One aspect of it that I don't think gets enough credit is that when you're bilingual or you have some sort of understanding or appreciation for other languages, like Jennifer was saying, the patterns of other languages, it makes you much more creative. So if you are a naturally creative person, if you might say maybe you're like, I'm in this history class, but I'm going to be a business major, I'm going to go into marketing, but you know other languages, that gives you another framework to understand how to express an idea that maybe you're trying to sell. Maybe you're trying to get people just to care. Like, I'm not trying to sell anything, but I want people to care about the thing that I'm trying to promote, because chances are they're a student and they've paid a lot of money for it already and they really need to utilize it. So I need them to care about the thing. So when you have another language that you can just sort of use, it's almost like you kind of become poetic without meaning to. It's just another way to see something, another way to express it, and that can directly come over into your work.
It was just really fun, to learn
Right.
history and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with having fun learning.
Honestly, I had no game plan when I graduated. I just loved history, so I just went for what I loved. And it kind of just worked out for me because I love what I do now. It has nothing to do with history per se, but
But is there something I never thought of? Is there something to having a joyful undergrad experience and then you have a joyful career? Does that translate?
Absolutely.
Yes.
The quality of life is nice. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I loved school. I loved it. I thought, but again, I was an old lady, so I thought everything was so unique, and there was this structure to it after being like this crazy person on the road. It was amazing.